Thank you all so very much. We have a really amazing, robust conversation tonight. You're in for a treat. And my name is Ann Phelan, and I'm the manager of resources at the Perkins Transition Center. And we support all disabilities and work with families and professionals and advocates with disabilities across the world. Tonight, we have a really special treat. Our guests, speakers will be talking about the vocational life space. If you wouldn't mind putting your state or country that you live, and also if you want to share information about who you are a caregiver or parent to or a professional, we welcome you to add your website and contact information. If you have any comments or questions, we invite you to put them in the chat. And if would everyone mute themselves, that would be great. And thank you so much. Let's begin. So we will just share some information if you need closed captioning. Thank you. We're excited to have you, Judy Ann, from the island of Grenada. Very much a treat to have you. Thank you. And again, the closed captioning button is on the bottom, right? And you just click on the CC and you'll have closed captioning. You will get copies of the recordings after the event later on during the week. So you don't have to take copious notes. But let's start today and talk about employment. So we do know that the transition to adulthood is quite complex, but we also know that employment opportunities are very important. We want our students and children and clients to continue the lifespan after high school and have a robust life. But we do know that if they're not leading a meaningful life, which includes some level of employment, that there is a tendency for some isolation and regression. So we really feel this conversation is so vital and important. So give yourselves a pat on the back for being here. Trinidad and Tobago, thank you, Cheryl. Excited when I see the Caribbean here tonight. So meaningful work supports independence, confidence, and not just well-being, but it also contributes to income. And we know in whatever political climate is going on globally, that we know that any way to support the income is really vital and important. But more importantly, we know the concept of self-determination is really valued, and we want to continue that. That means having choices and making decisions and advocating for themselves, and employment fits into that quite nicely. So the key statistics, this is for the United States, and I can imagine in the Caribbean and other countries around the world, it's quite similar, that we know that unemployment for people with disabilities is our concern, and that employment opportunities are not always available. And we are seeing a trend and a shift in different opportunities, and we'll be talking tonight with our guest speakers, but we will dive into it a little bit more. So here's some statistics that you can look at later. And you receive the slides. Why do these gaps exist? Well, we know that employment looks different with people with disabilities. There's certain levels of support that are needed, either initially that can fade on later with natural supports, or sometimes supports need to be ongoing. And sometimes those supports are just not available, or people aren't trained in understanding the needs of the diverse employee. Sometimes there's challenges in the work environment. Things can change and shift. People that were once mentors or natural supports might leave. So there's lots of things that could occur in the work environment. And we do know that in employment, it does require support and planning and making sure that all of the steps are in place to ensure that there is success. And we'll be talking about that tonight. So tonight we're talking about integrated employment. It's being part of a typical workplace. We want accessibility for all, and we want it to be an inclusive experience. So we know that working side by side with others and getting paid fairly is important, but more importantly, having those opportunities. So how do we navigate this? Let's dive into it tonight. I would love you to meet Zach Sappenfield and Katie Whaley. They're both from the University of Kentucky Human Development Institute, and they'll be representing the Supported Employment Training Project. So I turn it over to you. I'm so excited for tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate that introduction and the setup. It is great to be with you all tonight. Thank you for having us here. As she said, Zach and I are from the University of Kentucky at the Human Development Institute. So we are Kentucky's University Center on Excellence in Developmental Disabilities and have a range of projects across the lifespan and cross-disability focus. And Zach and I both focus on issues around employment. And we train providers and other stakeholders, parents and teachers, and whoever will listen to us really across our state and beyond. And we're really excited to be with you all this evening. And we're here because this question likely looms heavy on your heads and in your hearts, right? This idea of what happens next after school. So tonight we're going to talk about ideas, expectations, and opportunities around this and employment. The trick is the how it happens, practically speaking, is going to differ state to state and town to town where you live and how things work. One thing I have found to be consistent is that the adult service system works really differently than the education system. And so that idea of thinking about what comes next and learning who those players are and the resources and the agencies and who you can go to for questions is really important so that you, and tonight we hope to maybe help think about those expectations and also what kind of questions you want to ask. So when you identify who those people are in your state or in your hometown, you know what to ask them to figure out what comes next. And it matters, right? All of this, there's so much to think about, and it can be overwhelming for parents, for loved ones, for ourselves, for teachers. So we can all take some deep breaths together, right? And start with the basics. What is it that your loved one wants, right? If it's your life, what do you want? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to be around? What do you want to be known as, right? As you become an adult and start your own identity. And we were here to talk about employment. And so it is really exciting, as you said, to point out some folks from the Caribbean and other places, but I work mainly in the space of our country, and then the terminology we use, although it happens in other countries as well, is this idea of employment first, right? So while there are a lot of things to think about in what comes after high school, in general, what do people do after school, right? We go to college, we join the military, we get a job. And so it makes sense to have this similar expectation for all of our kids, for all of our students. And we know that this hasn't always been the case, right? Even with these larger initiatives and focus on employment first, and just talked about the statistics, and they're not as improved as we would hope for all of the work that's gone into it. And so this is another way to try and change that reality for people, right? And so every state has their own definition of employment first. And APSE is the Association of People Supporting Employment First. It's a national organization that focuses on disability and employment, and this is their definition. Employment first means that employment in the general workforce should be the first and preferred option for individuals with disabilities receiving assistance from publicly funded services. Simply put, employment first means real jobs for real wages. It started as a philosophy, this idea of we know people can do more, right? Maybe you knew one person with a significant disability who got a job. You're like, well, if it can work for her, I've got to figure out how it can work for my daughter, right? And we saw pockets of this happening in different places. And then it became a movement. More people believed and wanted this for themselves, for their adult son and daughter. And slowly it started to become policy and regulation and law. And it reached that point because we found that the more intentional the system can be, the more likely we are to make change, right? If nobody's paying attention and trying, we really don't get very far. And people have known good ways to help folks with significant disabilities find good jobs for decades. It just hasn't happened on a large enough scale. And so employment first is one way to try and expand this expectation. thought I heard something. Sorry. And almost every state has some sort of employment first initiative, policy, regulation, or law. So I encourage you to look up what it means in your state and what's going on. Some states have really active training and engagement or councils around it that you might be able to learn more about what happens. That could be a good touch point for you to find out who you need to talk to as you plan for your loved one or your students. Again, this is that employment be that first and preferred option. So it means that we look at helping adults, students as they come out of high school find jobs before we look to other parts of the service system, grouped activities, day hab, those kind of things. Now, we live in Kentucky, so we have an employment first law. There's no federal employment first law. But there are federal laws that support this idea, right? So in 2014, we had the reauthorization of the Work Innovation Opportunity Act, otherwise known as WIOA. And while not an employment first law per se, it's certainly intended for employment to be the focus for students coming out of high school. All students, regardless of the severity of the impact of disability. And I love this one quote from it, that Congress makes clear that youth with significant disabilities must be given every opportunity to receive the services necessary to ensure the maximum potential to achieve competitive integrated employment, right? That integrated employment that Anne talked about. And then it lays out that these other parts of the service system need to work together more effectively in order to help that happen. That looks different in different states. But again, when federal law is saying you service system have to collaborate and talk to each other, it's more likely to happen. Now, as much as I happen to love policy and systems work, not everybody does, the reality is that laws don't work together. People do, right? So what impact have you seen in your life from the laws that have changed? We know we can't just rely on things to work together as they should or the way that somebody would have hoped. That's why you're here, right? To figure out how you can make this work in your own life for the people you care about. So to be the true implementation of what's possible, we need parents and youth and schools and adult providers and businesses. We all have to work together in the real world. So again, as we talked about competitive integrated employment, this is set in statute. So if you are working with, say, your state VR, vocational rehabilitation agency, all the jobs that that agency helps people get, those employment outcomes have to fit this definition, right? Because if we're going to use public dollars to help people find jobs, then we say it needs to be a typical job, right? Because in the disability service system, we've called a lot of things work for a long time that weren't actual work. Like we've referred to going to a day program or a day hab as work, even though it's not paid employment, right? And so it set that expectation, that statute of what we mean by competitive integrated employment. So we've had raised expectations. We've seen pockets of good things happen. We've set it in our laws, federal, more and more across the states. But we know this kind of stuff still happens out there, right? We still hear these kind of things in the real world, in our day-to-day lives, right? Oh, my grocery store has lots of those people to bag groceries, right? That stereotypical thinking of what kind of jobs can those people do? And we'll talk later about why that's a question we should not be asking, right? Our town has a cafe where those folks can work. It lets us off the hook, right? That's not necessarily competitive integrated employment. What about people who want to work where other people work and get paid, right? That's not what they want to do. They don't want to work in a coffee shop or the recycling center or whatever it is. And they want to be around other people and have a typical job. So we hear these kinds of things, right? I can't work or I'll lose all my benefits. Or if I work, I can only work a couple of hours a week. And it matters because these ideas can make it really easy for us to settle, right? For that stereotypical job, because my grocery store is hiring, and so we'll just go there. Or Whaley likes to go to the movies, and that's the only place I'm going to think about. Or I hear some parents say, well, my kid has a job and he doesn't love it and he doesn't get many hours, but most of his friends he went to school with don't have anything. So They don't know that they can ask for something better or get a different job that fits more in line with what somebody really wants to do. Or we don't understand, we do not have time tonight to talk about the impact of wages on benefits, but it's a thing. And I just see way too many people either not go to work or limit their hours and their earning potential in ways that they don't have to do, and they stay poor on purpose. And that is one of those things that breaks our heart and makes us angry, right? We don't want that to happen to folks. So I'd like this collage of pictures because these are all people with a significant impact of disability, right? They would meet that definition in systems that define it that way, who are all working in competitive integrated employment. And I know that not everybody who's on this screen right now, work wasn't always an expectation for them. Right? That expectation wasn't necessarily set early in life for each one of those people, but it was figured out based upon who that person is. Because employment first really is that belief that everyone has something to offer that's worthy of pay.
Thank you, Katie. I was an employment specialist in Kentucky for 9 years, and we talked to a lot of families who are getting out of the public high school system. And one of the first things we would talk about is we're graduating high school. This is a very exciting time. There's usually a party involved, summer plans, vacations. Somebody might have a camp that they've gone to every year of their, young adult life, and they want to go to that. There's also that question of what's going to happen next. And I usually would talk to people and, tell me about your high school experience. And for everybody, it was across the board. School in general, maybe it was good. Maybe it was not that good. Maybe they changed schools. Maybe they had some kind of job training in there. Families always want to know, and it's wonderful to see so many families in here, what are our next steps? I always wanted to talk about how are we preparing for the workplace? That's what we want this person's long-term future to look like. And for anybody, it's a lot to go from a very familiar place like high school. We have our routine figured out. We know our classes, our teachers, to go into public and be asked to do a job. Skill set, soft skills, your work endurance, all of those things come into factor. Okay. So that's why we talk about vocational training while we're still in high school. We've done lots of academics, but vocational training are specific job skills learned while in high school, either through the school or through a community provider that's working with the school. This is an opportunity to develop real world job skills in the classroom and in public settings. So when the high school career ends, they're leaving with a skill set. They are anticipating wanting to go work. This isn't going to be brand new for them. They have ideas. The family has ideas. And they're ready to go realistically start looking about work instead of not discussing this, not preparing for it, and just being like, okay, go get a job. That kind of preparation helps us to be more successful. Okay. So pre-employment transition services is vocational training. It's required by federal law for students who are presumed eligible to have access. It's provided by a variety of means, schools, your local provider, but you would want to get in touch with your special education department or your local VR agency to learn more about these and how your student can be a part of them. Like I said, sometimes they take place at school, sometimes they take place after school at a different location in a different program. They've broken the curriculum into 5 points that they feel like this is the stuff that's going to help you actually get ready to go out and work. Job exploration counseling. You're learning what you will really do on a job. What are the skills required? What is it actually going to be like in there? What's expected of you? Looking around the community at what real jobs actually look like, which most people haven't done before. Work-based learning experiences, which could include in-school or after-school work opportunities or experiences. So really going somewhere and doing something, performing a job, practicing, developing endurance, and building skills. Internships, job shadowing, job readiness training, job placement assistance, and on-the-job training. So if you notice, that's a lot of going out in the community, learning about different kinds of work that are available, and lots of practical hands-on training. So in that way, this is different than the classroom. This is really hands-on stuff. And it can be a lot more interesting that way because people are actually doing something. They can see the results. They can, take data. I did this many units in so much of a time, or I did this much work in this period of time. Next time I might be able to do more. Or I really, really enjoyed this. How can I do more things like this? Or this wasn't the best fit for me. Those kind of things. Work readiness training, developing our social skills and independent living, which can include experiencing job readiness training, promoting self-awareness and esteem. A lot of this is getting used to the way we communicate with people at work. During job searches, I spent lots of time telling people how to introduce themselves, practicing that, speaking about yourselves, talking about what you're good at, what you like to do. So when you're speaking to an employer, you can go and do those things effectively. Post-secondary counseling explores all the different options that are out there. So work, school, vocational training, anything that might happen after high school, which I think is very, very exciting because it's expanding a lot. There's more options now at higher level learning places and vocational schools where people can go in and do work and learn. And instruction and self-advocacy, which includes peer mentoring skills, training, benefits, and financial readiness. So all the things that might affect the worker's financial outlook, how to set up different kinds of accounts, dealing with training, and going through all the benefits that are involved with somebody. Okay. And then transition programs. So these can be provided by a school or a local agency. It offers that additional vocational training during the student's high school career, and it can also result in job placement. So with these programs, a lot of times they're not just doing all the pre-employment transition services that I talked about just now, but during the course of that program, they can also go out and look for jobs, get placed, be trained, and get to what we call stability, where they're working independently on their own. What you would want to do is figure out what options are available in your school or your area. Like I said, a good place to start is with your school's special education department or your local vocational rehabilitation agency.
All right, so as we talk about how to find these kind of programs, how to run these kind of programs, because it looks like this audience is filled with all of those. You have lots of different roles. And we know these programs happen in lots of different ways, right? As Zach said, even in my state, I can talk to a group of teachers and they're from across my state and the programs look different in all of their different school districts, right? So that is the reality. But one thing we want to make sure happens is that whoever provides these programs, that it happens in a way that makes sense for your student, right? For your child, for your loved one, for the students that are in your classroom. So whether you provide these opportunities or need to think about how to have them structured, or you care about someone who receives these, you can share what you know about how someone learns best and takes in information to help with how that structure can happen. So I'm going to show some pictures quick about one opportunity that happened in our state last summer. And so this was a week program run by our Kentucky Deafblind Project. And so this in 2025, it happened to happen in the eastern part of our state, so in eastern Kentucky, which is a gorgeous area in the Appalachian Mountains. And so they brought students from across the state for a week together. And so one of the activities they did was with this organization called the Housing Development Alliance. And it's a nonprofit organization that rehabs and builds affordable housing in Eastern Kentucky across lots of different counties. Now, I wasn't a part of it. I'm really just kind of a fangirl of it, to be honest. I know some of the people who were involved, and I will tell you, it was one of the best social media posts that I've seen in a really long time. And so it caught my attention. The post was really respectfully done, which, we don't always see in general around disability issues. And it was just such a really cool and unique opportunity. So while there were lots of things that happened in their week, I think they went shopping and grocery stores and planned meals and some other things. This was one of the things that they did. And so in that connecting the learning slide, right? If people who are deaf-blind learn best through experience, as that triangle showed, then we need to make sure that we structure experiences, hands-on opportunities. And so the staff from the Deaf-Blind Project met with the local Chamber of Commerce to think about where they could do this and have some of these experiential opportunities in the Eastern Kentucky region, and they were based in Hazard, Kentucky. So the students spent a day or two helping to build a shed for a family. So they used hand tools, power tools, and had the chance to learn all kinds of skills and experience this type of work and activity. And it took planning, right? So the Deaf-Blind Project staff prepared the Housing Development Alliance staff on what to expect, and the same with the students. They didn't just show up and hand people power tools. So preparation included an overview for the students of what was going to happen and what kind of tools they would use and what the project would be and what the end result would be. And then for the HDA staff, they covered things like the use of interpreters, the importance of contrasting colors, touch communication, hands-on modeling. So it was really cool to hear them talk about the preparation that went into it ahead of time and then what the students got out of it. And so you can see some pictures here of students using the power tools. There's the group of everybody that was there along with some of the staff from the Housing Development Alliance. Now, are all of these students going to grow up to be carpenters? Of course not, right? But I've had the chance to teach teenagers with or without disabilities to use power tools and this kind of home repair work. And the impact is incredible. It can boost confidence, and every kid needs to learn that they can do hard things, right? That's just one of those things that kids can benefit, that we all can benefit from. So it raises that belief in oneself and it ups the expectations of what could come. And if I can use a powered nail gun, I can do all kinds of things, right? Like it just raises that level of confidence. Go ahead, Zach. Oh no, this is still me. Sorry, my notes. So think about your role and how you help structure activities for students and for learning and for success. So if the goal of transition needs to be in reaching that next step, which we hope is going to be a job, right? How can you ensure that students are learning in ways that make sense to them? Again, laws don't work together. People do. Programs, as much as those of us who plan them would like to think they automatically work together, they don't always. And so people have to, right? So how do we bring in the best information and support so that people can get the most out of it?
Okay, thank you, Katie. Supported employment is the process where a student or job seeker works with an employment specialist from a local agency to find a job. This usually starts after high school or right at the end of high school. It's hard to begin a job if you haven't graduated yet. You just don't have that much time. But you can begin getting to know your employment specialist as you're graduating. So by the summer, you're looking for jobs. We'll get into that in a second. But support employment is designed to promote personalized employment opportunities for people with disabilities when they need support to discover their personal interests and contributions. So learning more and unpacking what this person is good at, what they do well, what they're passionate about, If we're asking them to work a job, let's get them something they do well, they enjoy, and make sure that it's in a place they can grow. Finding and negotiating a job that fits things people like to do and do well. So actually going out in the community, representing somebody, talking to employers, figuring out what kind of job is done there, and negotiating a job for them. Become established as valued employees through training, making sure that they're doing their job well, that they fit in and they have the right supports there. And then later on pursuing job advancements. So if they want to be trained on something new, they can. If they want to talk about a promotion, even years down the road, looking for another job, they could wind up doing that too. Okay. The support and employment process looks like this. We talk in our group a lot. It's very powerful, but it's not fast. This takes a while. The first aspect, discovery, you're just spending time to get to know somebody. You're observing firsthand their talents, their skills, their interests, what they're into, the support needs that they have, and the ideal characteristics of a workplace. Where are they going to thrive? What kind of work are they going to enjoy doing and do well? And where are they going to be well supported while they're working? That's usually very, very fun. It's one-on-one work. You're getting to know an individual and talk about how great they are, all the skills that they have. Job development is taking the knowledge of that job seeker and then using the network, doing informational interviews with employers, and going through that application process. So the employment specialist should already know the job seeker very, very well. And then they have resumes, visual resumes, picture boards. They're ready to go out and talk to employers about this worker and see where the best place is for them to work. Supported employment services is going through that whole onboarding, orientation, training until the worker is stable on the job and they can work independently without you standing over them and being around all the time. We all need help at work. So we set up natural supports like anybody else would have that they can go ask. So they really are working out in the community on their own, just like anybody else. That's the goal. The employment specialist comes in and helps to make sure that that goes effectively. And then our extended services involve checking in twice monthly and making sure that somebody's doing well. If they need additional training, if they need to have a meeting with their manager, maybe they're getting a review. Not overbearing at all, but like I said, we teach twice monthly in Kentucky to go in, visit with the worker, and make sure everything's running smoothly. Okay. The employment specialist, what will they do? They're going to get to know the job seeker and learn what you like to do, what you're good at, and what kind of help you may need. So, like I said, lots of one-on-one time. You're spending time doing what the job seeker likes to do and what they're good at. You're going to go to their familiar places. You're going to try some new things. But the whole time, that employment specialist is looking at this person's skill set and their interests. They're going to help you learn about different jobs and can talk to an employer with or for you. They can also help you apply for a job. So when you're talking to employers, you're going to be speaking up for yourself. You're going to be presenting them with resumes and talking to them and figuring out what is it like to work here? What kind of jobs do you do here? Is this going to be a good place for this individual to work? And the job seeker and the employment specialist do that together based on how much support that they need. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's very little. And our next bubble, they're going to make sure you're able to learn to do the job in a way that makes sense for you. So it's supported training, really. You kind of learn the job together from somebody who works there like anybody else would be trained, and then you're there to provide support to the job seeker as they become proficient with it. That's it, making sure that you're successful and providing accommodations as they need to be so that you can do your job well. And this is big on the last circle here. It is the employment specialist's job to help you learn not to do your job for you. We talk to this about families a lot. Like the whole goal here and the whole goal of employment first is to have the individual working on their own. And that can be a lot. This could be the first independent thing that this individual's done in their lives, in public, on their own, and that can be a big change for families. Okay. Ready? All right. The first phase, during discovery, you spend a lot of time having meetings and doing outings with the job seeker. The whole time you're looking for their strengths, what they do well, what they like to do, different intelligences that they have. What is this person good at? What natural skills do we see emerging when this person is doing the things that they like, their everyday things? You're paying attention to their interests, what they like doing, what they're drawn to, and then the conditions for success. Where are they going to work? What is that going to look like? So from those three elements, you're trying to put together the perfect job for this individual where they're not just going to squeak by, I'll be okay, but they're really going to do well and they're going to thrive.
All right, so these are just a few examples that I've heard, and they were said during school in thinking about what just people, and like Zach talked about this discovery process and getting to know people, right? And what are those gifts and interests, and how can we think about that moving forward? So, for one woman, it came out as well, like when we really asked questions about what she liked at school. Well, she likes her art teacher the best. She's got really nice handwriting, so she'll help do thank you notes for the teacher, but she needs a lot of help with grammar and spelling, right? There, people always resort back to those things where people might not have their strong suits. But by hearing about the art and the handwriting, it led to this theme of she really has this gift for making things look beautiful, right? And so starting with that is that theme and moving forward of, okay, where do people get paid to make things look pretty? This is not a job that I would ever get in a paid vocation, but plenty of people do, right? And it's a much longer story, but she ended up getting a job with a local florist and put together bouquets and was really talented at it. And there were some natural things about the job, like she used crutches for mobility, and it was hard to use her crutches and carry flowers at the same time. But the shop used a cart to push flowers from the cooler to the workstation. And so that cart functioned like her crutches would to help her physically with her mobility. And so but it started with just this idea of this is what she likes best in school, to think about how that could be vocationally relevant. Or another woman, Leanne, and there was a lot of questions trying to figure out where Leanne's skills lied. And it was sometimes people can give you lots of information and you hear wonderful things about your child or about students in the school. And sadly, sometimes it kind of feels like pulling teeth to get those positive things. And this one came as, well, if you want to see Leanne Reed, give her a Sports Illustrated. Well, that had never dawned on the employment specialist, right? This person who's working on what comes next in Leanne's life. And she has this mind for statistics. She's not going to talk to you about anything else. And she ended up getting a job with a local newspaper stringing sports statistics in the high school sports section. Nobody saw that coming, right? But it took that knowledge about her and paying attention to it rather than like, okay, but this is school. We don't have time to look at your sports magazine. Paying attention to that and figuring out what it was about that magazine that got her interested and got her engaged. And another guy in high school, and I talked about, well, he likes to play with keys. Okay. And he memorizes numbers. And they got him a work experience in school at the bus garage. And it turned into a good paid job once he finished school. And it was at the bus garage of this rather large school district. And he would be the one to match the keys with the bus that it went to and make sure everybody got their keys and they were all turned back in proper ways. And these were all people, with all due respect to the real people behind those bubbles, these weren't people where a parent was like, my kid's going to get a job just like his siblings as soon as he grows up because I'm going to treat all my kids the same, right? It was figuring these things out and taking these bits of information from school and what that might that mean and what kind of job could be best for people. So it really is thinking bigger than just those stereotypical you have an intellectual disability, so we're going to get you a job bagging groceries at the grocery store or wiping tables at Wendy's. Those are hard jobs with a lot of turnover, and people don't stay in them for a lot of reasons, and they can be really difficult for folks. So it's really thinking individually about people, right? And so this goes back to the job development that Zach was talking about, of really knowing what interests this student, right? We all know students where they might say a whole lot of things or they might say nothing, but man, if you hit on something that interests them or motivates them, all of a sudden they attend to the conversation in a different way, right? You just see it like in their physical being, that spark. And then you take that and their strengths and those conditions for success. So this gets to the question in the chat box that somebody had, of starting with that of, how do we talk about this to employers, right? We don't want to act like the significant disability part isn't there. And so we're going to get to that, Melissa, a little bit. That could take us a whole other hour, and we don't have a whole lot of time left. But we got to know what those conditions for success are, right? What's it take for this student to be successful? So whether it's a predictable environment, right? One of the things about the woman who worked at the florist was it takes her longer to learn new concepts than others, and it can be difficult to get to know her. So one of the things they looked for was a job where you can't guarantee nobody's going to quit, but a job that has lower turnover in general, so there'd be consistent people there. So once somebody understood her and how she learns and how she best takes information, that person would be there over time. Because if you go to, say, Wendy's, right, and you teach somebody how to work with this person and how to teach them how to do tasks and support them, and it's a place with high turnover and that person leaves, there's never anybody there that knows that person that can help share that information and just help talk to them and make sure they know what to do. And when the schedule system changes, how to explain the new schedule system to them. So what are those conditions for success? And that's what leads us to our job search, right? If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, and you go somewhere and they say, well, welcome to our agency. We have 5 businesses in town that we work with. Which one would you like? To me, that would be a red flag. It should be, who is your son or daughter? Who is this person you know? Who are you if you go yourself? What are you good at? What do you like to do? How do you like to spend your time? What kind of people do you want to be around? Then you figure out where to go to look for work, right? And it's all about knowledge, this job development, right? For everybody, it's not just what you know, it's who you know, right? So if you're a person who's involved in this individual's life, help share your network with those providers or with yourself and think about, who do I know? What kind of work happens there? What's it like? Who can I ask? Who can I, right? Who knows this person? Oh, she knows somebody. She works in the hospital. She knows all kinds of people. Hospitals are huge. What all do they do, right? That's how we can start to find these kind of things. So be a part, an active part of that conversation and share your connections. Now, what do you say? Again, that's a whole other conversation. And I would say we use as typical a language as possible, right? We talk about job placements and job development, right? I'm not going to go out to an employer and talk about job development. They don't need you to develop positions. They have positions, but it would be, as a provider, we would talk about, I'm here, I can offer you recruitment assistance and retention support, right? I'm here, I know people who are looking to go to work, so I'd like to know what kind of opportunities that you have. And then when you learn big picture about what this business needs, then you know their needs, you've built some trust, then you can start to talk about people and what they have to offer. Because if you just come in and say, I help people with disabilities find jobs, are you hiring? The answer is probably going to be no, because they don't understand what you're saying or what you have to offer them, right? That'd be like saying, I help people with blonde hair find jobs. Are you hire? What does that have to do with anything, right? And so you got to build the trust of the employer. You got to learn what it is they need and what it takes to be successful there. Oh, well, I'm supporting somebody who's really interested in this kind of thing, is really organized, is really set on routine. So if you've got jobs where a lot of people don't like the repetitive tasks. If you have somebody and that's what they want, that can be a bonus. So it's learning and having those kind of conversations. And these are just a couple of events that have happened in our state in the last year where we've been in a position now. The economy is changing, right? If you listen to the news, you know that, but businesses have needed employees. And so workforce has learned we have a huge gap in people with disabilities who are employed and are not employed. And they want to access everybody they can to enter the workforce. And so even our Chamber of Commerce has taken initiative in helping share this information with employers, right? What's it take how do you recruit people? If you're looking for employees, where are good places to find folks? And what does it mean to employ someone with a disability? And it really helps to share that information employer to employer as well. And then those on the job supports, right? So those conditions for success, what's it going to take for someone to be successful? And how can we watch for these to see if they exist in a business, or how can we help structure it, right? Ask for it, let somebody know that it's needed. I mean, I've had coworkers where verbal information can be really overwhelming. And so she just asks for instructions in writing and for meeting agendas in advance, so she knows what to expect and what the timeframes are. Right. So all of these kind of things can be really helpful in that regard. And that this is most certainly not an exhaustive list, but it's part of that conversation, right? She can certainly do this kind of job, and she's going to work best if, but it can be easy for her to get distracted. So if she's sitting at a desk, would it be possible to wear some noise canceling headphones so that she's not hearing all of the noise going on in the waiting room, but can focus on the task at hand, because that's going to help her do her job. Oh, well, you want to be able to get her attention. What kind of systems do you have set up to make sure you can get people's attention? I know on my computer, I have different notifications popping up all the time, right? That can happen. How can you silence them? How can you see them and help and structure that for somebody that needs it? And then these extended services. So this gets to that next question, I think, is it's in supported employment as a service. That employment specialist is to follow up with people, right? Make sure they have what they need, that they continue to get information in a way that makes sense to them, and check in that that's what they want to do, right? Or do you still like this job? I mean, I've seen jobs be a really cool job for someone out of high school, but 5 years later, it's not that cool a job anymore. And they want more hours. They want different tasks. They want a different kind of challenge. So making sure we are in touch with people and helping them move on in their career, just like we are other folks. Because again, right, everybody can work. All of these people have a story of why this particular job works for them. They were not applied for willy-nilly. They weren't just place and pray placements from an agency. There's reasons why these jobs make sense to each person. And for when there was an employment specialist or someone involved, how they went to have that conversation with an employer did make a difference, right? In explaining what they can do, but learning about that business and what are your needs. And like, just for example, the one in the top middle where you see the back of her hair, that's at a bank. And someone who worked for that bank came to a community conversation at an event that was happening through the local Chamber of Commerce, where a disability employment agency talked about what they did. And one woman who worked at the bank was like, that's just really interesting. Do you think someone could work at my bank? Mm-hmm. Probably. What kind of work do you need? Right? Like, I don't have people ready to do every job in the history of our community, but I'd love to learn more about what the opportunities are there, and learned what happens and what the needs were and what it's like to work in that business. And that's what started that conversation and led to her getting this job that was a really neat job for her. So along with the slides that you'll get, thank you for those who asked, there's another resource page too. And while we don't, I'm sorry to say, have time to show videos tonight, there's the links to these videos, right? So this was Lucy, and she was coming out of high school, and Lucy's on the autism spectrum. And as someone got to know her, she really likes caring for people, right? She has this heart to care for people. And it meant knowing what it means for Lucy to be autistic, and not thinking, well, this is what it means for my cousin to be autistic, but what's it mean for Lucy, right? How does she process information? What does she want to do? What kind of environment would be best for her? And she wanted a place that she doesn't like downtime. She likes it to be busy, and she likes things going on. And she ended up getting a job with a local child care center. And in talking with the child care center, it was, I'm working with someone who's interested in working with young children. And so I just want to learn more about what happens here and what kind of positions you hire for and what your needs are. And that was the beginning of the conversation. And there were a lot of things about the center that matched transportation, location. It's a high quality center. Things are done well, but you didn't have to have your associate's degree in order to start a job there, right? Like those things all made sense. And then it was a matter of, Lucy could use really specific information. So we can work with you on how you explain the job, what the lesson plans looks like, so she understands those communications. And then if there's any issues or you're having trouble, certainly talk to Lucy, but you can talk to us as well. And so one of the things was, Lucy, if you've been in early childhood, you know, we redirect children, right? We don't just tell them no. And that was really hard for her. And so the employment specialist met with her off-site often to go through scenarios of how to redirect a child. Well, let's talk about what happened in school today, and when did you have to say no, and what was going on, and let's think about other things you could have said or other ways you could have redirected them, right? So they were that additional support to the teacher, and that was part of how they explained the role in this setup as well. Right, so here's lots of those reasons of why it worked for the person to go to this, not just looking in childcare, but this particular childcare center, and narrowing down our search of where we're going to go to talk to a business. So this is Jake, and for Jake, it really took the employment specialist had a hard time. So if you talk to Lucy, she's going to give you a lot of information. She is not short of words. I've met her quite a few times, whereas Jake is not. Jake does talk, right? But he's not just going to open up and give you a lot of information. And at some point, Jake's mom said to the employment specialist, well, Jake, have you shown Ashley Herbie out in the barn behind the house? The employment specialist thought, I don't know what that means. Well, it was a car, right? In one of the outbuildings on their property. And that's where he really flourished. And so he's not a mechanic. He's not going to go out, and he didn't just know how to change the oil right that day she met him. But it was, where do people get paid to be around cars, right? And then talking to a car dealership, I help people find work. I'd like to know more about what all happens here. And we're able to make that kind of connection. You have a link to his video. And lots of people work at the dealership that aren't mechanics. And so there was a use for other types of tasks that they would have as well. And so he started with some of those simpler tasks, and you saw he had the picture cues. So then it was talking about Jake could do this kind of work, but rather than written instructions, it'd be really helpful if he had pictures to follow the task list. And so the employment specialist was able, they would create the picture task list, right? So the employer said, this is what needs to be done in writing. The employment specialist put it in images, and they created the list so Jake knew exactly what to do in the sequence. So it's that kind of a conversation, rather than saying, we want you to hire Jake, but he doesn't read. It was saying, Jake is really interested in being around cars. He has a lot to offer. When you talk about different skills, well, yeah, he could take out the trash. He could water the plants. At some point, he started turning on the cars to make sure they'd start in the cold weather. And then they got into, well, Jake learns best through modeling of tasks and through pictures, and we can help you with what that might look like. And then the employment specialist offered that kind of support and explanation to the employer. Right.
All right, Miss Katie, we got some questions building up. We also got permission from Ann to watch a video, unless you think we want to get through these slides and answer questions.
Well, we're supposed to be done at 7, right?
Yeah, I think we'll probably have to pause on the video, but a couple of the questions are great. Thank you.
Yeah. No, we're not.
Okay, thank you, Ann. So things to consider right now when we're at home with our family and our loved ones. How are we identifying strengths, interests, and abilities? It can be things that you're very, very used to, that you see every day, that somebody does a lot. So that's why an employment specialist is also involved to get a fresh set of eyes on these things. But when working with an employment specialist, with your job seeker, you're going to be one of the people as a family member or maybe teacher or staff who knows these things about this person, who knows what they're good at and can talk about those things that they can do. I'm always big on what chores are we doing at home. So practical skills that are done around the house. Um, Doing chores with your kids is a whole other talk. But I'm a big believer that nobody just pops up and they're really, really good at a skill. They may have an aptitude for something, but we learn those skills through practice and training. So the more that we're doing at home, the more that we're doing outside of school, the more training we have, the better off we're always going to be. Are we developing life skills as we get older? Are we preparing for independence? What does that look like? Even if you're not ready right now, what are we working on to become more self-sufficient in the home? So maybe someday somebody could live independently. Are we developing communication skills for the workplace? We work with lots of people who are nonverbal. That's not the end of the world. There's lots of tools out there so people can communicate with each other. But it requires practice and often it does require accommodation. And how is work endurance? Specifically, how long can somebody work at something? Most shifts start at 4 hours and with a 15-minute break in there. But that's a decent amount of time to have somebody working, especially if they haven't done it before. Okay. A few more things to consider. Advocate to the special education department for vocational training in an IEP or 504 meeting. Talk to the school about what are we doing for that? How can we get vocational training involved in this person? How can somebody's talents be translated in terms of vocational strengths and skills? So this thing that they're good at, what can we do to turn that into a job? What would that look like? I always thought it was funny. My dad's best job in the whole world was being a radio DJ because he can talk. And being a radio DJ, you can listen to music, you can talk, and nobody interrupts you. And he actually had that job for a while. But it's a real simple example of how do you connect something that somebody does naturally to something that's actually out there in the world. Example, I like to organize things. I like to build things. I like to use tools. All of these things are what we should be paying attention to. And it's not just a ratchet. It's not a very, very small thing. That's the beginning. And you grow from that idea to look at all the different jobs that can be done through it. How does this relate to theme on job skills or conditions for success? And is it possible to get work experience while in school? Like we kind of talked about some of the different elements of vocational training. Okay. On our Support Employment Training Project website, which is accessible through this QR code, we have some good employment checklists for job seekers and for their families that progress through years. So things you could be looking at, things you could be talking about, ideas, skills that you want to develop as somebody ages. Okay. This is a vision statement. Another way we talk about this is as a visual resume.
Hey, Zach, we're going to need to do it really quick and wrap up. She just put it in the comments. So,
yeah.
For us.
So you can, yeah. So you can see this is a nice way to represent somebody when you're talking about them or going to an employer. Okay.
So along with in the resource page that we had given and to share along with the slides, you will find this vision statement and a template to create your own. And it can just be a really helpful thing to have in your meetings at school of this is the goal. This is what we're looking for. So everyone's on that same page.
These are things that you can do to help advance. Oh, okay.
Time for that.
The slides, okay.
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
This was so amazing. We're starting to lose some people, and I want to say that I want to respect time. On the other hand, you can see how important this whole topic is, and I just really want to thank all of you for being here. I hope this discussion has inspired you and opened some, doors for new connections and ideas, because I think you just brought so much out here, Katie and Zach, and want to thank you so much. And we have a couple slides at the very end. So we do have some sources of information. Zach and Katie are contacts, and that will be in the slide. Also, I provide one-on-one transition specialist supports if you need that. We got a lot of hearts, Katie and Zach. I've never seen that in any of our webinars before. Next slide, please. Our next transition talk is February 1st. It's on innovative technology and solutions for self-determination and lifelong support. Next slide, please. We also have something really important. Save the date. 5 Wednesdays, consecutive Wednesdays in April at 12 o'clock. We have a lunchtime forum on healthcare series with experts that are just going to blow you away with information on pediatric healthcare, gynecological and reproductive healthcare, and everything else you would need to think about. Next slide, please. Again, we have transition counseling available for you. Next slide. And we have a Facebook community. And when you get the slides, you can actually take your camera and go over the QR code. Everyone, give yourself a pat on the back for being here tonight. I hope you were excited about it as I was. Zach and Katie, rampages of appreciation for tonight. It was amazing. Thank you, everybody, and have a beautiful night.